This is the Flex Network. Flex on everybody.
Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Flex Network. I'm your host, Flex Shane. You can follow me on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. I'm joined by the Sultan of Swing himself, Alan Seslowski. Alan, what's going on, brother?
Oh my God, I'm glad we're back doing this. We were rocking every week for a while, and we stopped doing podcasts, not for any other reason than just to take a breather. But this is our specialty. This is where we shine, right? The off-season talk. So I'm really looking forward to this.
This is honestly, this is my favorite part of the time of the year. Like during the season, it's fun, but it's kind of grindy, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it. Every day you're checking waivers, you're checking lineups. There's Thursday games, there's Monday games, Tuesday games, Wednesday games. At least in the COVID era, it was an interesting year. I think overall it was a lot of fun. But this is where we make our hay, Al. It's early on. It's participating in some of these early round best balls, which we're going to talk about today, which of course helps set us up for draft season. I know all the way in August, but
there's no better way to prepare for your draft than to participate in a best ball where you have a little stake in the game, you know?
Absolutely. And you know what? That's also my favorite place to look at ADPs, because I mean, for all these mock drafts, they're all over the place, right? People are testing things out. Whereas, you got a few shickles involved, and it's actually reliable ADPs. But I would be remiss, Al, if we didn't start by talking about the big trade that went down yesterday. Of course, Jared Goff and 2 firsts and a third going to Detroit for Mr. Matthew Stafford to the Rams, of course. What are your thoughts on that?
Win-win, both teams. It was more than obvious, and this is not a hot take, that the Rams are Super Bowl contender every year of the past few years, and probably the next couple of years moving forward. But Jared Goff is below that threshold for acceptable quarterbacks that can get you there. He's, if there's no adverse circumstances, Jared Goff's fine. He's a perfectly competent NFL quarterback, but the position needed an upgrade. So some people think it was an overpay. Matthew Stafford probably is that cut line, like the minimum level of plus quarterback that could probably raise the play of the other receivers. So they win. They paid a king's ransom for him, but they did, take on a massive contract, which doesn't mean much. I think they owe him over $100 million in guaranteed money. They could probably, they have to keep him this year, Jared Goff. So yeah, it's a win. The Lions get some good draft capital in 2022 and 23. I think it makes sense for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly can't cut him this year. Goff has $43 million of dead cap, whereas he's only got a $27 million salary. Next year, 2022, his salary would be $25 million, but his dead cap hit would be $15 million. So I expect him to be around for at least the next 2 seasons, and then after that, there is an out.
Which is fine, because even if the Lions draft a quarterback, again, no quarterback sits for 2 years unless you're Jordan Love, right? But if yeah, I mean, at least they know you're not going to be afraid, even though Jared Goff is making this huge salary. If you draft somebody, you're not going to be afraid to play them. Jared Goff is just going to be, you bought Jared Goff, you traded for Jared Goff for the picks.
I mean, I love it for the skill positions in LA, right? I mean, Cooper Kupp, he had that knee injury right around the playoffs, which worried you a little bit, but he escaped a major knee injury. So I think he should be good to go for next year. Of course, Robert Woods is pretty reliable every single year. I think that this is going to do good things for Cam Akers, who was finally coming on last year. I mean, we saw that DeAndre Swift was getting 5 targets a game, pretty much in the passing game. So I could see them doing that with Cam Akers. I've always liked Cam Akers. I think he's got decent hands, maybe not quite as good as DeAndre Swift, but I could certainly see them using him in all 3 phases of the game. Overall, man, watch out, man. The Rams are going to be good next year.
Yeah, I mean, I expect, they're good every year, right? They were in the second round of the playoffs. So I just think that, really the question for us is, what does this do to the value of Matt Stafford and then the skill players around him? Does this make the tight ends a little bit more viable? TJ Hawkinson, everyone everyone likes him, but nobody thought he was getting enough targets. Is this a downgrade for the tight ends in LA? So it'll be interesting. I think that the immediate reaction from the best ball markets, the ones that pop off in the next 2 weeks, is going to be Matt Stafford gets elevated into the top 12 QBs if he wasn't already there, and definitely I think there's going to be an early run on Cooper Kupp and certainly Akers, who was already going in the late third. As I predicted that it's not a hot take, but he'll be a second round player when it's all said and done. And then Robert Woods, maybe instead of going in the 6th and 8th round respectively, they both go now in the 4th and 5th round.
So I was mentioning to you that I was mapping out some of the very early, because I think the underdog drafts just started this week. So we have maybe a week of data, but Cam Akers early on, his ADP is 15. So that's smack dab early second round right now. So I think, and this was before the news. This was from yesterday morning is when I pulled this.
That's one QB leagues. I was thinking of the couple drafts that I did were Superflex leagues, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's earlier than I anticipated.
Are you talking about startup dynasty drafts?
Yeah, but startup dynasty drafts often have similar ADP in the first few rounds, have similar redrafts. Like, there's no one that goes in the top 24 picks that wouldn't go in a redraft. This same group of people.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about the first round. You say it. This is a Seslowski-ism. You cannot win your draft in the first round, but you can certainly lose it. And let's parse through this very first round ADPs, because this stuff makes me excited. And right off the bat, I think what was pretty interesting is that I want to say, took Travis Kelce at 7 overall in one of your drafts this week.
Right.
He went 5 overall. I just started the draft. I'm still midway through it. I'm very early, so I've got about 4 rounds of ADP. But he went 5 overall, and his ADP as a whole is 6. So that's right smack dab in the middle, kind of where people were taking Michael Thomas last year. Now, my question to you, Al, is 1, are you willing to pay that price? Obviously, you are. And 2, do you think he's going to be able to pay it off? I mean, this is ahead of guys like Devontae Adams. It's ahead of Jonathan Taylor from an ADP perspective, and ahead of that next tier of running backs, your Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Cam Akers, that group of players. Is he worth taking ahead of all the wide receivers?
I mean, there's many ways to build a fantasy team, a best ball team, a dynasty team, and Travis Kelce starting point is one of them. Some people are, some drafters, some fantasy owners are going to be like, I don't want to build with a tight end. I'm happy getting Darren Waller 2 rounds later. I'm happy just playing multiple guys at the position. Where other fantasy players and, in a $5, $10 best ball and underdog, I wanted to build it that way. But there is a real advantage with Travis Kelce. Now, keep in mind, underdog is half PPR. So, but I don't think that matters. Travis Kelce is, when you slot him in with wide receivers, he's a top 5 wide receiver. And the fact that he is tight end eligible just makes him that much more valuable. Now, in any sort of premium scoring, 1.5, 0.7, 1.75 PPR, or even greater than that, Travis Kelce could be justified as a top 3 or 4 pick. I mean, it's just the point too much. And he doesn't look like he's slowing down at all. So it's not going to be my main build starting with a tight end, but it's certainly how I wanted to try it first off, because I was just thinking about it. I was like, wow, Travis Kelce's going to have a first round ADP. Let me see what that looks like in a lower stakes best ball. And, there was some merit to it, and there's also some downside. You definitely lose out on value in the running backs and wide receivers.
I think what's really interesting, what you kind of nailed here, is just the fact that he is, when you compare him to the wide receivers, he's a top 5 wide receiver in terms of points. And then when you add to the fact that you are going to have an advantage almost every single week in that position, it really does seem like a no-brainer. And just like every other year, parsing out to tight ends this year, there's going to be Travis Kelce on his own little plane, right? And then you've got George Kittle and Darren Waller. We're assuming George Kittle's going to come back healthy, and whether or not they've got it.
Isn't there too much risk with George Kittle to even consider him in the first 2 rounds? Injury risk.
Yeah,
exactly.
I wouldn't do it.
No way.
I wouldn't do it. But if he fell to me in the early 3rd round, if I'm picking right at the start of the first, I've got my running back. I come back. I'm either going to wide receiver or maybe another running back, and then coming around early 3rd round, I would consider him. Right now, his ADP is 16. Again, moving target. I'm not convinced that I wouldn't take Darren Waller ahead of George Kittle.
Yeah, I'm with you. Especially at ADP. If Darren Waller's ADP is in the 4th round, I mean, that is a no-brainer. But yeah, just as far as just straight up rankings, we know game to game that George Kittle has like the theoretical better upside, but we've seen Darren Waller put up, a 200-yard 10 plus catch game. So who's to argue that he doesn't have that? Now, as long as Derek Carr is the quarterback. Now, if there's a new quarterback, and we don't know who the quarterback's going to be in San Francisco, but I guess that doesn't really matter. George Kittle's still going to be the main passing target there.
Okay, so you've started doing a little bit of your rookie prep. I know you have. The top tight end this year, probably one of the best tight end prospects to come out in a long time, is Kyle Pitts. He's being potentially mocked. Of course, this is just by draft Twitter, right? So who knows where he's actually going to go, but he's being mocked to the San Francisco 49ers. And I look back
at what pick number?
I think it's number 9 overall. Yeah. Rough numbers. I don't have it directly in front of me, but I think it's right around 9. So this guy is an elite pass catching beast tight end. So I could just imagine if they decide to go that direction, they can play the 2 tight end sets. They've got Deebo Samuel, our boy, hopefully he's healthy. Of course, Brandon Ayuk, and then whatever they want to do with their running back rotation. That's another pretty dangerous offense. I think if they were to get a guy like Kyle Pitts, you wouldn't know where the hell they're going to go in any given play. I think that would be pretty sick.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts out of Florida. I've just started doing some tape watch on him, and living down here in Florida. I mean, he's a very popular player, and he's certainly worthy of a top 10 overall real NFL draft pick. He's a tight end eligible for fantasy, but he is more like a wide receiver, right? And we're going to get into some depth on him. Now, I think him going to San Francisco is not optimal for his fantasy value. One, because of everything you just laid out. If he goes to San Francisco, I think that the point that we hit on earlier, moving George Kittle to 3, maybe even 4 below, Mark Andrews, that might be a bridge too far, but certainly below Waller if that happens, because it's now you're talking about multiple pass targets. That would be a terrible hit to all of the players in this offense, because now you're talking about it'd be like the equivalent of having 3 good running backs when you have 4 viable passing targets.
Yeah, and the thing is, we didn't really see a season with Deebo Samuel because even though he played some games, he wasn't healthy for the entire season. So we don't really know how that offense is going to look as it is right now. Right, with Ayuk and a healthy Deebo Samuel, add one more piece in there. I mean, maybe for fantasy it wouldn't be fantastic, but for the NFL, I just think about the early days back with Mr. Gronkowski and that other tight end guy. We're not going to say his name, Aaron Hernandez.
Jimmy Graham. Oh, Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah, and just actually, how dynamic they were,
Yeah. Now, we were talking about Kelce in the first round. That's how this discussion started. So here's my one pause. And I don't know if this should even carry any merit, but we've seen this before, the first round tight end in fantasy. Remember when Gronk and Jimmy Graham both went in the first round? It never worked out. Now, I know they're totally different players. They were more touchdown dependent. They had these outrageous seasons. Travis Kelce feels more like he should be viewed as a wide receiver. Plus, he has this little advantage of being a tight end eligible. But so it's a little different. But I'm a little cautious to move forward with him in any draft that I had a little bit more stake in the game on, just for that reason.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think maybe middle of the first round might be a little bit early for Kelce. I actually had it. So in this one, I wanted to do slow draft. They only had 10 team slow draft, so it's a 10-person league. But I was picking on the one I
did was 12, right? The one I did was
12. Okay. Yeah, so I was picking on the turn, so at the 10 and then the 2.1, so 10 and 11. And I was kind of hoping Kelce would fall to me, because to me, that's kind of the sweet spot. You do that. At that point, most of the elite running backs are going to be off the board. But I ended up going Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs. I would have been just as happy going maybe, heck, I would have doubled up Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. On the turn, maybe come back at a Patrick Mahomes and just go absolutely nuclear. Because again, in these best ball leagues, you want points, right? In any given week, those 3 players together, it's pretty dynamic. But okay, I didn't want this to just become a tight end discussion. I want to know,
I just want to underline one point that you made I thought was really good, is that game format matters. So in your season-long league, I wouldn't recommend taking Kelce in the first round, because you need receivers or running backs that you could projectably start every week. In a best ball, you can load up on those middle-tier wide receivers that you're just guessing on every week in your season-long league, because you never have to make that lineup decision. So going after Kelce in a best ball makes a little bit more sense in the middle of the first, rather than a season-long league, because you want those projectable every week starters.
one of the hardest things in fantasy, of course, is deciding your start sit, right? And
It's
early
impossible.
on, yeah, it's tough. It's very hard. And early on, if you can get guys like a Stephon Diggs or Devontae Adams that you're just going to plug and play into your lineup, you're never going to think twice about it. It really makes those decisions down the road a lot easier, because a lot of the time you're not going to have super deep running backs. So whereas you might have 5 or 6 viable starters at wide receiver, it makes that decision a little bit easier. Plus, you're getting an elite player at that position. But
okay, move on.
I'm interested to know. Yeah, I'm curious. So I've started doing my tiers because we've talked about it, and I'm building up the draft kit for DFS Army, and I know you started working on that as well. And I think what's interesting is that there's this group of players, and it's right around, I guess you could say, end of the first round, early second round. And there's this group of the running backs that I'm having a hard time really parsing out in terms of how I would rank them. And I wanted to get your thoughts. So this is how I've got it right now. I've got Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, Cam Akers, and James Robinson. I've got those group of wide receivers, or excuse me, those groups of running backs. And then the next group that, I give them one tier below for one reason or another, but Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, who was frankly disappointing last year, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, and then I've snuck in Najee Harris, who's a rookie. We don't know where he's going. I've got him at the bottom of that tier. Now, I think that's interesting, but is there anybody out that should either be not in that group of players, Al, that you think I'm ranking too high or perhaps too low?
Yeah, I'm opening up my rankings as I'm talking to you, and
Okay.
I think I'm a little bit higher on Swift than I think the market is already. I've seen him like fall out of the second round in some of these early mocks. I don't know if this latest trade will help or hurt his perceived value, but yeah, no, you hit on all the names that I think are relevant. Like where are you ranking Saquon Barkley?
Oh, so this one was tough. I've got my top 4. I've got CMC, then I've got Dalvin Cook 2, Alvin Kamara 3, and then Derrick Henry 4. It could be dynamic rankings, but that's where I've got them right now. The next tier of player that I've got Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor in a tier right there above the other guys that I just mentioned. So to me, right now, I've got Barkley one ahead of Jonathan Taylor, but that could shift. I mean, so for those, we didn't even mention at the start of the show, but of course, Alan, you've been doing a lot of work over at Roster Watch. You're helping them with all of their dynasty rankings. And one of the, I think, really fun conversations that you guys had at the start of the season was Saquon Barkley versus Alvin Kamara. So you mentioned it before. A lot of the time, dynasty rankings really are very similar to our redraft rankings. And I believe you're kind of lower on Saquon Barkley than the market, I want to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 2 seasons of season-ending injuries. I mean, Saquon Barkley's an elite talent. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And the Giants, with their current offense, I mean, yeah, there's hope, but I just don't think he's locked and loaded. You saw Wayne Gallman produce in the same offense. Now, I know Barkley probably would have produced even better as the Giants got better last year. And obviously he deserves to be one of the top tier running backs, but there's more risk with Saquon Barkley. People are just thinking that like there's no risk whatsoever. You're talking about 2 season enders. Maybe he's just his size, his fame is not conducive with the type of cuts and athletic ability that he has to sustain a full NFL season. I mean, to take Saquon Barkley and just think that you're taking him as we did last year, that he's just a locked and loaded RB1. I think that it's confidence that you should not have. Now, if you want to do it because you see the upside, which there's certainly there, no problem. But there's even risk with Alvin Kamara because presumably no Drew Brees. We saw how he produced or lack of production when Taysom Hill was in the game. So both of those guys carry more risk than usual. It's going to be interesting. I mean, Barkley could easily rebound and have his early top 3 value restored, but there's so many other players in the first round, and you hit on it in the beginning. You can't win your draft in the first round, but you certainly could lose it. I'm not willing to stake my whole fantasy season in a high stakes league on Saquon Barkley in the top 3 or 4 picks, but I understand why you would. I get it. I don't have a good argument against it.
So you're taking Derrick Henry ahead of both those guys?
Yes, and that fits my guiding principle, which is you can't win your draft in the first round, but you certainly could lose it. Derrick Henry is rock solid as they come. Now, I know there's going to be a new offense there with a new offensive coordinator, but any offensive coordinator comes in is going to make Derrick Henry the main focal point of the offense. So I'm doing it that way. Understanding the upside is better with Barkley, but I'm managing floor, I'm managing downside in the first round.
Who do you like, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley?
I think Barkley's probably the better pick. And again, we talked floor. Nick Chubb is the safest pick you can make in the first round outside of Derrick Henry, but Kareem Hunt really does cap his upside. So we're in agreement there, I think. Well, you have Barkley as a top 3 player.
Yeah,
so I think the market's going to agree with you. I think the market
is the top 5. I've got him number 5 overall.
Yeah,
so are we just locking in CMC then 101? I mean, when he was on the field last year, he was friggin' elite. He was CMC, but we talked. He had a full season injury. A lot of times, it's not the years; it's the wear and tear on the tires for these running backs.
Right, he's still young enough. He's 24 years old. It's not like he was knocked out for the season. When he came back, sometimes when those guys come back, if he produced a dud when he came back, that'd be fine. But he was a 30-pointer when he came back. Then he went out again. He came back too early. But even compromised in non-optimal conditions, he still produced. For me, there's no reason to go away from him. You talked about wear on the tires. Maybe this saved a little wear, but running backs get injured. We excused it from Barkley last year. We still drafted him as a top 2 overall player. Now it's twice. So now I'm proceeding with a little caution. And I could be wrong, but I'm not going to be wrong to the point where it's going to lose me my league, because I'm still going to get a very good, sure thing player in the first round.
I've been fantasizing about Deshaun Watson. Now, granted, the organization has said they're not going to trade him, but Deshaun, he's pretty adamant. I think he's going to get a trade. Going to Carolina. I think that offense, oh man, that would be so exciting. Of course, DJ Moore is kind of my boy. I love him. Very disappointing season. And he's had a good year, but disappointing from where he was being drafted. We saw Robbie Anderson explode last year. Curtis Samuel, who we know Flex Matt has been in love with forever.
He's a free agent. He may not be back there.
Yeah, he might not be back, but for the right price, maybe they'd be willing to sign him. That's kind of my fantasy. I would love that for fantasy football. We'll see if that happens. I don't know, but if Deshaun went to Carolina, I mean, CMC, same thing. I think that would be so good for him, and that would be a fun offense. But
I have in my write-up that I'm doing for DFS Army about free agency predictions, I have Curtis Samuel going to the not the Packers, sorry. That would be interesting too. I have him going to the Jets.
That would be very interesting. Another potential landing spot for Mr. Deshaun Watson. So the Jets, you're a Jets fan. Who do you want them to be drafting? Assuming that they're going to be using their draft pick on a quarterback.
Oh, you asked what I want as a Jets fan is I want them to stay with Sam Darnold and draft Sewell, the tackle. But I know Jet fans hate that response, and I understand why. Justin Fields is an exciting prospect, and but Justin Fields is worthy of a number 2 pick just by looking at some of the tape and some of the information on him. But he's not a locked in number 2 pick. Like Trevor Lawrence is a locked in number 1 prospect. We wouldn't be surprised if Fields goes 2 or if he goes 10. That would be a good, a little bit of a surprise, but not too much. So I think when you can get the all-time, one of the best tackle prospects there has been in the last few years, plus you already have Becton as a tackle. Now you've built a real foundation of a team. I like Darnold, but I understand. What would you think for the Jets? What's your opinion?
See, I love Justin Fields. I really do. I think he's a winner. He really is. And I mean, it's tough though, right? Because you build out offensive line, you can do a lot of things, and really, it can really be a bandage over, frankly, an average or below average quarterback like Sam Darnold. The thing is that Darnold did suffer a bunch of injuries last year, so it's so tough to really put a verdict on the guy when he was it looked like he was starting to get it. But as a Denzel Mims fantasy manager, I don't really trust Mr. Sam Darnold, to be honest with you. Jamison Crowder was surprisingly efficient last year, which was awesome. He got peppered with targets. I don't know. To me, the Jets, they've got so many issues, but an offensive line is good. But if they have an opportunity to draft a career quarterback who I think really could change their franchise, I would do it with Justin Fields. But that's just me. I don't know.
I think the market once again, I think the consensus is certainly going to agree with you. And you were talking about Deshaun Watson earlier. I don't think Deshaun Watson's going anywhere unless somebody comes with the craziest deal ever, but like, why would you do that? You just, you have leverage when you're the team. You're just like, no, we're not trading you. I don't care.
The thing is, I mean, we saw what Matt Stafford just went for. What you would have to pay to get Deshaun Watson would be absolutely astronomical. Bill O'Brien isn't there anymore, so people are actually going to have to pay for him.
People are talking about the Jets. It's like, why would Watson want to go to a Jets team where they've depleted all their assets to get him, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're not going to dive deep into the rookies right now, but at the very top, I think that it's relevant to talk about, because we're talking about best balls, to talk about where we would consider drafting some of these early round running backs or some of these higher tier running backs. And when I say that, of course, I'm talking about Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and Javonte Williams. I think they're kind of the consensus top three. They're 3 players that can have 3-down work roles. I think that those 3 players are right in the conversation with the draft class last year. I think Jonathan Taylor's maybe a step above all of them. But when you're looking at Najee against, say, like a Cam Akers or a DeAndre Swift, I think they're all in the same conversation in terms of a talent. And then if you think of the fact, okay, these guys are going in the first and second round, if you can, say, get a guy like Najee Harris mid-third, early fourth round in your best balls, is that where you want to pull the trigger? I know we had this exact same conversation last year with JT, right? And where we'd pull the trigger on him.
And by the way, if you drafted Jonathan Taylor in the third round of your best ball, you lost because he gave you zeros for, he gave you he didn't score for you for like multiple weeks, 6-7 weeks. So it was a losing.
I drafted JT early third round in our Banana Hammock Boy League.
Totally different. Totally different.
Okay.
Totally.
You're talking about best balls.
Because in a season-long league, there's a replacement value. Like, what running backs did you get later on that you were popping in there? You didn't have it. It's a totally different game. So I agree. He was a winning pick in a season-long league where you got him third because you started him early. Then when he wasn't scoring for you, you were able to take him out and replace him. In your best ball league where you thought you were set. You thought you were set because you drafted running back. You just didn't. You didn't get the value out of him. So I looked at some of the winning, the percentages of winning players on best balls. They have that data out there. I'll find it for you, and we can go through it together on a podcast. But Jonathan Taylor was on very few teams that won best balls, that cashed in best balls. But in season-long leagues, you were right. He was a rock-solid home run pick because he was a difference maker down the stretch when you were able to projectably start him. Well,
and then every week isn't the same. I mean, if you got a player that's just going ham during the playoffs, that's what's going to win you your championship. Yeah. And a guy like Jonathan Taylor, that's when he really took off again.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Okay, so Najee, then you're kind of hands off for a guy like that because he's probably going to be going in the late third, early fourth to start.
Right. I mean, you're talking about best ball where
I'm talking about best ball, strictly best ball right now.
Now, it's not, if you're doing a $3, $5, $10 best ball, you want to take a swing just to have, like, it's no problem. I have no problem with it, but I wouldn't use him as a building block strategy. When you were talking about guys like you, guys like me, and many people out there, we don't do 3, 4 best ball. We do 15, 20. I do 50. This year I plan on doing about 60 of them. I'm not using Harris undrafted as a building block player in the third round. If he lands, say, people are talking about him on the Pittsburgh Steelers and they don't re-sign James Conner. Okay, now we're in business. I may have missed out because then he'll probably go in the late, early second round. I probably have missed out on some good value, but again, when you're doing 20 best balls and they're $10 each and you've invested some money that you care about, you want to be very careful about risk in the first couple rounds. All right, now a couple of them swing for the fences, no problem, but not a building block.
Okay, I got a question for you. A couple unrestricted free agent running backs that were, one of them was very productive this year. One of them was a little bit disappointing, but still serviceable. Aaron Jones. Maybe he'll be a Green Bay Packer. I don't think he will be. I think he's gone. They've got A.J. Dillon. I think they're going to move forward with Dillon. He's currently being drafted right around the 2-3 turn. And then another guy who we really liked last year, a little bit disappointing, Kenyon Drake. Currently going right around the middle of the 6th round. Would you take a swing with any of these guys at the right price? Or are we kind of just saying, look, we have no idea where they're going to land. They're getting old. Aaron Jones in particular, I mean, playing with Aaron Rodgers, how could you really replicate that? What do you think?
Yeah, so I have different opinions on both of them. So Drake, I think he's appropriately priced.
Okay.
5th, 6th round. He probably falls where, you went maybe early on receiver, or you took Travis Kelce and you want to take a swing. But I don't have I don't think Drake is signed, right? Isn't he like
he's unrestricted?
Yeah, unrestricted. So I don't know if there's going to be a lot of interest in him. I could see him being part of a committee, even signed as a backup. Now, Aaron Jones is different. I think Green Bay actually, in my predictions column, I do think they're going to sign him. And if they don't sign him, I give it about a 75% chance in my predictions column, which, by the way, I'll tweet out probably next week. But if they don't, I could see he's only, in my opinion, is going to go to a situation where it's a better situation. Maybe Atlanta signs him the same way they were going to treat Todd Gurley to a multi-year deal. I think if Aaron Jones is looking to get paid, which he should, he's probably worth what any of the top 2 or 3 or 4 running backs are worth in the league. That he's going to go to a better situation. If he does, or if they pay him, if a team pays him, like Arizona pays him, they're going to use him right now. I think he wants to stay in Green Bay if they want to run it back with Aaron Rodgers. So they can't sign both Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones.
Jamal Williams, he's replaceable. Let's call it what it is.
Right, but I'm saying they can't. He's going to, they can't sign both. So I don't know if the Packers are going to want to go in with A.J. Dillon and Jamal Williams. I think Aaron Jones is someone that Aaron Rodgers is in that coveted circle of trust. Yes. So I'm predicting he will be back, but it's certainly in play. Money talks in the NFL. And so I think Aaron Jones is appropriately priced in the 2-3 turn, probably even a value. Now, he's somebody I would take a swing for and as a somewhat of a building block in hopes that pays off, because we know if Aaron Jones resigns or is put in an optimal situation, he has the potential to be a first-round player.
Chase Edmonds is going at 99 overall. That's what, 8th round? He seems like a guy. Is he okay? First of all, do you think Chase Edmonds has a talent to be an RB1 for the Arizona Cardinals on his team? And then would you consider him as an RB2 with some RB1 upside on a given week?
I think we see that's a great question to ask because he's shown it in flashes, right? He's been a top 5, top 12 running back in short stints, but I think we've also seen from the last few years that he's like a relief pitcher. He's like a backup, a good backup quarterback that comes in and wins you 3 or 4 games, and everyone thinks that next year that guy should be the guy, and then they fail. Like Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater is someone that you want to, when your quarterback gets hurt, you throw Teddy Bridgewater in there and he holds down the fort. But as a starter, it's not going to have a lot of upside. I think that's the same thing with Chase Edmonds. I think Chase Edmonds remains who he is. He's someone who you can give 5 to 8 touches, 9 touches a game. I know if he's the only running back there on draft day, I think it's a lock. As lock as you can get in the NFL for them to draft a 2nd or 3rd round running back. So no, I don't believe in Chase Edmonds as a starter. Do you? What's your judgment on that one?
He's shown flashes, and even when there was both Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake, they were both productive in a given week. But I just don't really see that upside. To me, Chase Edmonds is a guy, if I can get him in round 9 or 10, at that point, you're kind of taking swings anyways. Why not have him, especially in a best ball team, so that if he does have these big weeks where he pops, he might show up in your lineup. But I think you're going to draft somebody, or maybe they'll sign a free agent. Kenyon Drake just didn't quite turn out to be what they thought he was going to be, following when they actually traded for him 2 years ago. But Chase Edmonds, I think he's got talent. I just don't know if he's an RB1 on an NFL team. But okay, Al. So we're gonna close it out here. One last question. I'm gonna swing to the quarterbacks here. So you were the Josh Allen guy last year. We had it on this podcast over and over again. We talked about how you thought Josh Allen had just that absolute breakout potential. Guess what? He broke out. Year before that, Lamar Jackson. Year before that, Patrick Mahomes. It's very early, but if you're going to say, okay, a guy that you can get maybe as the QB, I'm going to call it 6 to 12 or even later, that has that potential to pop in your best balls. So a guy you can get value on that you think is going to outperform his value at ADP at a QB. Is there anybody that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the same locked, strong take as I did on those 2 guys early on, but there's 2 of them. I mean, the obvious one is if Jalen Hurts becomes the starter, but that obviously there's been a little bit of cold water thrown on that where they want to rehabilitate the value of Carson Wentz. But I think
pause for a sec. Is that a mistake?
Yeah, I mean, I would go with Jalen Hurts, but they may end up trading him. I was talking about that with the Geek on the DFS Army podcast. I could see if somebody offers a first round pick for Jalen Hurts, that they would probably take it. I mean, that solves all their problems too.
Jalen Hurts, oh, he's so good. Anyways,
yeah.
Well, moving on.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think the looking at like the QB, the ADP outside of the top 12 QBs, the guy that can return top 5 QB value is Taysom Hill. He is going to be the starter in New Orleans. We already saw it. So to me, it's he's being ignored. I think his ADP is like QB 19 or 20. Get him while you can, folks. Get him while you can.
His ADP is 169.
What is that? Like quarterback what?
Let me see. I can forget this. You put me on the spot here, Al.
Yeah, it's fine. We got time. But that's the one that sticks out. In the Dynasty rankings, I even 25. Have him. What?
QB 25.
Yeah, there you go. QB 25. Okay. Yeah. So that's the guy that actually could finish in the top 5. All right. So just get him. Just lock him into all your best ball leagues. And right now you don't have to fight the room for him. Round 9. Take him. If you want to, is there some risk? Sure. I mean, because he hasn't been named the starter, but what is there, an 80% chance he's the starter?
I mean, Jameis Winston, I would say that when you compare I mean, he's a free agent. That's one. I think they might consider signing him back. It's always valuable to have a backup QB, and he didn't really show anything, right? So our team's going to be jumping at it. I would say that his interceptions, obviously poor decisions, but when you compare that to say what Tom Brady did this year in Bruce Arians' offense, it's just a more risky offense, right? So maybe his interceptions were inflated a little bit, but ultimately turning the ball over will cost you games, right? And we saw that. So I agree with you. I think Taysom Hill is going to be the starter for sure. I'd give it like a 90% chance, barring like a major injury or something like that. But I think it's going to be exciting. We're just getting started. I mean, it's January 31st, and we are talking about best ball leagues. This is the place to be, ladies and gentlemen. Al, where do the good people find you? Where can the people find you?
At Alan Seslowski on Twitter. Can you hear me?
Of course.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, sir.
At Alan Seslowski on at Alan Seslowski on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Find me over there.
Of course, you are writing articles over at rosterwatch.com. Go check those out. I believe a lot of them are free articles. For Dynasty Depot, RosterWatch is doing the exclusive Dynasty rankings for them. I believe you are working with Mr. Dunlop and Byron Lambert on those rankings. And of course, you can find you can find us on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We are the Flex Network.
The Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network.